All right, so projects, I know that's, all of this is sort of about projects, and I talked about it a little bit the other day. The idea was, and we'll sort this out as we get to it, but the introduction to the project was just like, what are you doing? Why is it important? What you hope to do? So this is all online now. Okay, right. And then I had this thing where I wanted to talk to you about narrative hierarchy, right? So the idea is, you're going to be operating maybe here. Borges had this beautiful notion, I thought, which was that at the short story level, you think of it as if there's a book, right? There really is a book that exists. You're just telling a short version of it, which sounds like you might be lazy, but it's not true. Okay, so lots of things. So you can work on all sorts of projects. I'll just give you a few, and then there'll be many more in this set of slides that I might just sort of leave. Right, lots of thematically, if you want to work on hurricanes or whatever you want to work on. I mean, there are all sorts of, if we can draw a circle around a set of words, right, you can make mistakes by saying, very easy mistakes by saying, oh, I think this is the important word for this area, right? I'm just going to study the word bomb and then predict bad things happening in the world. That's not the way to do it. You have to have you can have an entry point into it, like you think these words are important, and then you can have ways of collecting words that are adjacent to it. Hashtags provide, a pretty powerful thing here. There was the but thing I talked about, the ratiometer stuff. If you're interested in that, then talk to me about it. PoCS is something we're building now. Story Wrangler, which I hope will be kind of gigantic, but that's basically trying to get out the frames that are being talked about around events that are as they kind of emerge in real time. This is just so Jacques Bailey, I mentioned him. He's the spelling bee guy, right? I was talking to him the other day, and so there's a lot of undefined words in Homer and so on, and we talked about the fact that half of the words in the lexicon for any large enough text only appear once, right? So which is a zip law story. So anyway, if you want to work on something like that, that's fun too. That should be the vanishing of reality. If you're interested in that, it's all about conspiracy theories and so on. YouTube, 3 degrees of conspiracy theories. I don't know how it's functioning now, but if you let it run and then play the next thing, it can go into some strange places. We're going to talk about 6 degrees of separation, like how do you get who do you get to based on sort of purposeful search? What can you do with that sort of thing? And then it's all about information space. Wikipedia is kind of like this too, right? You can play around with we have a paper on this first link. You can follow the first link on each page. And there's sort of there was this nice idea that you end up at philosophy, right? That's sort of this thing. If you play around with yourself, you just go to the first link in the main body. And that turns out to be basically true, actually. But, this is all these algorithms, right? The crazy things we're talking about with rich get richer, like what's being put in front of people. Dewhurst, who's the assistant deliberator, you could work with him on all sorts of things and with me. But there's a rich get richer model generalizations for people who want to do that sort of thing. Lots of stuff with risk, which we'll be talking more about. These are just a couple other pieces I'm saying here because I know some of you want to work on climate, so absolutely. Let me just say what this is. Telotherm, this is work we did a few years ago, and it's the on average coldest and hottest days of the year, which you can kind of get at statistically now. I'll talk a bit more about measuring temperature soon, but we have, depends where you are in the US, but maybe 1,200 stations with about 100 years of data. It's variable. So being able to, we've been able to figure out where the shortest and longest day of the year is for a long time, right? That was easy, but this is a much more nuanced thing, and it matters tremendously, right, in terms of climate change and spring and so on. There's a fantastic data set from Japan that was put together based on all these records, very painstaking. 1,200 years of the earliest date of cherry blossoms in Kyoto. And 1,200 years, right? And it's fantastic. So it's just a year thing, and then you can see it go like that at the end. So these are very detailed and nuanced. All right. Okay, so we have lots of books. If you want to play around with books, we have lots of books. As I said, Twitter is interesting. So socio, info, algorithmo, econo, geotechnico, physical systems. It's just everything is involved. Yep. This is a list. You can check this out. So there's a list of papers. If you're interested in sort of like digging into something, then rather than novel research, then that might work. That's a pretty cool list. Let's see what that looks like now. Oh yes. So it's underneath the paper shredder. So we don't always run it, but it's a reading group. The joke is, of course, that this is how academics behave. But you can see this, right? The grand tradition of courageous academics everywhere review the painstaking, meticulous work of others not present to defend themselves. We endeavor to instantly and yet casually see where the paper obviously goes wrong and how we did, work we did 15 years, all this sort of stuff. Yeah. And then there's a shredder if it goes wrong by ritualistic vote. Chanting. We don't do that. It's okay. It's a joke. Anyway, so lots of things, and the links should be there. It's just really good stuff. Really good stuff. And in fact, it goes back. Here's just some really fundamental ones in thinking about complex systems. More is different is really the famous one there. All right, cool. Paper shredder. That's been franchised, actually. I know Klaus at Boulder runs a paper shredder, but he didn't realize we shredded things. Let's not worry about that. So lots of other possible. Oh yeah, Sixopedia. That was an idea. 6-word definitions of things. That's a great idea. Anyway, that's just sitting there. There are lots of these kind of things if you're interested in socio-technical competition. So this was a great thing. It took a little while to get the idea together, but it was like SETI, Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, which for a long time you could download something and run some stuff in the background on your computer if it was sitting idly, and help find aliens, or find alien intelligence, because I guess we'd given up on terrestrial intelligence. So this was a kind of a version of that where you install something and you're helping science because it's running some stuff on your computer. But it was trying to figure out how proteins fold, and that's a really hard, classic, fantastic problem. It would also allow you to watch it happen. You could see the computer trying to fold it, right? And that was the big thing that helped, because people started writing in and saying this thing is an idiot. Obviously, the rabbit goes behind the, whatever, and you pull it by its ears. And so they evolved it into what I would call a socio-technical. I used to call it play and crunch, but hunch and crunch rhymes, and so that works. So it's people plus computers. You could submit algorithms, and people could build on everyone else's work. So there's lots of things like this. I think I have the Zooniverse, which is one of these similar kinds of things. Started out of here. Zooniverse is a whole bunch. Oh, is it dead? Zooniverse, so sad. It can't be dead. That's not right. Did I just have it? Wow, they're in trouble. That's a beautiful website. That's bad. That's a whole, look, it's a Wikipedia thing. Oof, I'm worried about that. They went from categorizing galaxies, right? We got all this data, to figuring out whale songs and ancient scripts and so on. And it became this idea of people plus computers doing all sorts of things to help science, right? In a nice way. There's a fair amount of work on this. This is a fun thing to work on. There's a lot now based on how people move around. So there's the Where's George one, which is this one, which is dollar bills moving around the US. There's Barabazi's group, which is based on cell phones. We have work based on Twitter of where people move around. So interesting stuff. Then there's migration, and it's how it may or may not work, like the gravity model that I've showed you from Zip. Whole body of work there to explore that's developed. This is an ongoing, people have worked on this a little bit, but I think this would be fantastic. Jonathan Harris, I've talked about, has got some pieces here. So what's the modern geometry of the world, right? So you start in any city or any part of the world. How far away is everything in terms of time? And what's that map look like, right? So it used to be that it was pretty 2D, right? You had to kind of basically walk, and maybe you, right here at different speeds. I guess now we're getting to the possibility of Boeing saying maybe 3 or 4 hours to get across the Pacific, which is pretty fast. It's like 5 Mach or something. That's kind of a game for them now. But that's collapsing places, right? So if we wanted to get an upper part of Quebec, that might take a long time. It can be easier to get from like New York to Los Angeles than some part in in Quebec. So geography is weird, and it matters for how things spread, and especially diseases, right? So the airline network has become so you could just look at the airline network stuff that's been around. That's incredibly important for how diseases spread. So lots of things. So here's some more of this. Here's the migration pattern stuff. This is how people move around. This is a bit different to the gravity model. It seems very nice to me. And this one, yeah. This is pretty great. I mean, we've basically thought of this idea. I mean, if you've got something spreading around the world, you should be able to find the right city that it started from, if it did start from a city, because you just have to, sort of orient everything, point it to the right city, and it'll look like, oh, you can see in time that it's spreading away from it in the right way. If you choose the wrong city, it's not going to work. Lots of stuff in there. Oh yeah, here it is. Yeah, so here's the idea of that. We'll talk about contagion spreading in networks later on, but this is from a city, right? So it's spreading out, spreading out, spreading out. This is, I think in this case, starting from Hong Kong. Yeah, so starting from Hong Kong, all of this is in a sense like plane trips, right? Flights. So these cities out here are a long way away. It takes a lot of hops to get to them. And this disease spreading from Hong Kong, if this isn't a map. This is a map of the cities on the Earth, right? So that's what it is. It's just rendered from a Hong Kong-centric point of view, in a network structure based on airlines, and right. So no mountains or anything like that, or oceans. And if you look at it in the right space, boom, things spread really well. And so you can then, and they have this sort of thing too, right? So there's some spread that's happened, and you've kind of been recording it, right? If you've played Pandemic, you kind of have some sense of this. And if you get the right, so this is Chicago, right? So it's started in Chicago. And if you sort of map it onto Chicago's map, then you can see that it's the right sort of thing, right? So this looks like it's spread out from that source, where this is scrambled and scrambled and scrambled. This was published in Science. I think they're getting in a lot of trouble because there are all these cities, right? And I think somewhere, I don't know where it is in the paper, they snuck in somewhere from Middle Earth, like Minas Tirith or something, which was just, people put some little gentle things in some, it's fair enough, like a little bit of fun maybe, some terrible puns. That first Google Books paper, wow, punning is horrendous. Anyway, Steven Pinker's the problem, I think. But yeah, they weren't happy about that. Yeah. All right, so lots of things. This is a started work that has become much more sophisticated. It's coupling of networks, which of course people have thought about for a long time, but this is the power grid and then the communication system. And these could be both quite robust, but if you have one of them start to fail, it could cause this sort of failing to go back and forth. Paul Hines here has done a lot of work on this. This particular one doesn't necessarily hold up. It's a bit too much of a toy model, but certainly the idea is incredibly important. Robust yet fragile, we'll talk about that next. Lots of things. Oh yeah. Peter Turkin, I'll mention him a little more, but he's been doing all this work on the evolution of cities and so on. So yeah, this is very important stuff. Early warning signals, right? Critical slowing down. You can see that in certain kind of systems. I'm not sure if you can see it in social systems, but there are lots of systems where if you're measuring the right things, you can start to see that the whole thing's going to go pop. Prediction's huge. We want to do that. Lots of things. Tons of network stuff. This is human disease network. This has been critiqued. We don't have to worry about this anymore, but it was a very famous but very problematic study of spreading, and claimed that, I'll talk about it later, that obesity spread and so on. I'm gonna spread past these ones. Go, that was interesting. Yeah. All right, so there are very vague things here. We have the world's proverb champion, actually, Maida over in, Wolfgang Maida in Russian, and I think that's what he is. Anyway, he's a proverb hunter and writes books and books and books and books about proverbs. But they're little stories, right? So super interesting things, how they use, how they've evolved, how do they compete against each other. All right, so this is all sorts of very vague kind of things, and you can look at them. Oh yeah, that one's done, you don't have to worry about that. Phyllotaxis is fun. Lots of possibilities there, how plants grow, very universal those sorts of things. Missing data, terrible problem. We've worked on that a little bit. People generally ignore it. Okay, all right. So these are sort of just some flotsam and stuff at the end. You have to worry about that one. Okay, good. I think that's good. So the idea is look through these. I'll put it online. Oh, it is online. And just, yeah, and certainly groups are good. Don't have to work in groups, but groups are good. And we'll, over the next couple of weeks, come up with some plans, right? Okay. All right. What else should I tell you? Right, so that was supposed to be just sort of a splash of all sorts of possibilities. Okay.